On March 24, 1989, the Exxon Valdez ship ran straight into the Bligh Reef, ripping a huge hole in the bottom of the ship. The ship spilled 1,264,155 barrels of oil right into the territory of Prince William Sound. As many as 200 sea otters, 300 harbor seals, 900 bald eagles, and 250,000 seabirds died following the disaster. This heavily affected the fishermen and their way of life.
The oil came to Kodiak Island before the salmon fishing season started. The first effect was that it shut down the salmon season in Kodiak. So Kodiak was the only place in the state of Alaska where fishermen never fished salmon that year. Even in Prince William Sound, they fished on the east.
Because the fishing season closed, the people of Kodiak got extremely angry. At first, Exxon wasn't going to have a cleanup because they knew the oil was unstoppable, but the people of Kodiak protested for one. They marched down the streets yelling at Exxon to clean up the oil.
There was a big cleanup program that was instituted by Exxon, and they hired a company called Vico to manage the cleanup. Fish and Game was worried that if the nets were pulled up through the oil on the surface, that it would contaminate the fish, and then the fish would be unfit for human consumption, that people couldn't eat them. And they were worried that it would ruin the market for salmon.
Kodiak finally got the attention it needed, and Exxon hired a company called Vico to sponsor the cleanup. At first, Vico gave contracts to a very small portion of people. They started to spread the wealth because people started to get angry. Vico usually gave contracts to people with boats because they needed them for the cleanup.
Told that we wouldn't have a salmon season. Everybody was scrambling to get a contract on the oil spill cleanup.
The politicians set up an oil mayors group. They were making the decisions on who was going to get Exxon oil spill contracts or not.
The fishermen who had been screaming bloody murder, and the louder they screamed, of course, they knew they would get more money from Exxon. So the fishermen who screamed the loudest at the meetings they had every day here, Exxon would try to shut them up. Oh, be quiet, we don't want to listen to you. Here, take more money.
Because Exxon didn't want to make any enemies, they used money to persuade people not to go against Exxon. The health of the workers were also a big problem in this time period. Breathing in the toxicity of the oil caused 6,722 respiratory infections. Also, the toxicity of the oil could have been a cause for cancer.
I'm Dr. Alicia Draybeck. I work for the Alutiiq Museum as the executive director. Our subsistence foods are an incredible, important piece of our culture. It was devastating for families to not have access to those foods. Exxon Valdez oil spill is likened to any other colonial impact. It reminds people of the Russian conquest and the American school system squelching of our Alutiiq language. The contamination of our environment is yet one more thing that has happened to the Native community.
Since the oil damaged the wildlife, the Native people were once again violated. Because this was a time of depression, it had a huge effect on the social fabric of Kodiak.
The spill had an effect on the water and the wildlife, but it had a huge effect on the community of Kodiak. Some people got contracts to work on the cleanup and they made money, and other people didn't get contracts to work on the cleanup and they didn't make money. So the fact that some people were making money and some people weren't had a very divisive effect on the community.
Exxon didn't pay equally across the board either. Some people cut better deals than other people did.
Because of this, a lot of people had trouble cooperating and trusting each other while working.
There were some people who had made a lot of money as a result of working for Exxon as a contractor versus the people who, for ethical and moral reasons, chose not to work for Exxon, and that created a greater inequity in the community.